As the Russia-Ukraine war continues to drag on, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is faced with a fresh wave of difficulties. The latest challenge for Kyiv is military and humanitarian aid, particularly the influx from its biggest ally, the United States, after Washington dropped aid to Kyiv from a deal to avoid its government from shutting down. European Union leaders met in the Ukrainian capital to reassure their support for the warring nation. Foreign ministers from the bloc held their first ever meeting outside the European Union region. The roundtable meeting was headed by EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell, just a day after the US dropped a substantial amount of fresh aid for Ukraine to save its government from shutting down at the 11th hour. The visit to Kyiv also follows Slovakia's pro-Russia populist party winning the parliamentary elections.
I'm sure too. And you said it's about stability and predictability of the world, because this war is having deep consequences for the whole world. But for us Europeans, it's an existential threat. Maybe it's not being seen like this for everybody around the world, but for us Europeans, allow me to repeat it, it's an existential threat. And that's why we have to continue supporting them and discussing with our American allies and friends for them to continue supporting. And I am sure that this decision will be reconsidered and altogether will be on your side.
Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba attended the meeting and brushed aside any concerns around US dropping substantial aid to Ukraine from its emergency bill on Sunday.
So we don't feel that the US support has been shattered, because the United States understands that what is at stake in Ukraine is much bigger than just Ukraine. It's about the stability and predictability of the world. And therefore, I believe that we will be able to find necessary solutions.
While leaders from the alliance scrambled to reaffirm their support for Ukraine, US President Joe Biden also issued a statement a day before the meeting to assure Ukraine of continued support. This even as Washington stood at the brink of a government shutdown.
I want to assure our American allies and the American people and the people of Ukraine that you can count on our support. We will not walk away. The vast majority of both parties, I'll say it again, Democrats and Republicans, Senate and House, support helping Ukraine and the brutal aggression that is being thrust upon them by Russia.
However, the incidents in the last 24 hours seem to give an eagle's eye view of West's struggle to keep pumping Ukraine's war chest with munition, while also sending humanitarian aid for the economically devastated country. Elections are around the corner for several countries in the West, including the United States. Russia has pointed out on a long-drawn fatigue that Ukraine's allies will soon begin to realize as the war drags on. European nations are in the middle of several domestic issues of their own. UK's sky-high inflation and a spiraling migrant crisis looms over the constant diversion of funds towards war-ravaged Ukraine. Sergei Sumleni is a defense expert and director at European Resilience Initiative Center. He is joining us live from Berlin, Germany. Sergei, good to see you again. Welcome to the show. Kyiv is receiving support from all over at a very fast pace as we speak. Even if the weapons and tanks are needed, will Ukraine be able to handle the influx from the West? Your honest opinion, and also, what do you make of US dropping aid to Ukraine?
Yes, hello, and thank you for your invitation. It's always a pleasure to be your guest. Well, Ukraine indeed depends massively on the supply of the weapons from the West, and it's not only about the hard equipment like tanks, artillery, or other devices, but also ammunition, especially because the equipment which Ukraine had was Soviet-produced equipment and used ammunition of another caliber, like, for example, 152 millimeter shells instead of the NATO standard 155 millimeter, which Ukraine is using now. So Ukraine, yes, depends on the Western support. Still, we need to say that the Western support which has been provided to Ukraine, despite the fact it was very useful, it was not enough. It was pretty small in the numbers. Just imagine the front line which Ukrainians are fighting now is about 2,000 kilometers long, but Ukraine has received, let me say, like 20 Leopard 2 tanks from Germany, or 40 Leopard 2 tanks from Germany, and 20 Abrams tanks from the US. So if you dilute all these tanks to the front line, you will see the Ukrainians couldn't achieve any concentration of forces, and Ukraine has not received any long-range missiles or jets, which are extremely important for any offensive. So yes, Ukraine needs weapons, but Ukraine needs more weapons. And the United States is effectively one of the biggest, it is the biggest supplier of arms to Ukraine. And if the United States drops this supply, Ukraine will face a hard time.
Sergei, what does Slovakia's Robert Fico's win really mean for Ukraine? Will his pro-Russia stance have any sort of impact on the war?
Well, I would say Slovakia's pro-Russian change doesn't have immediate impact on arms deliveries for Ukraine, because Slovakia was one of the first countries which provided Ukraine with a lot of support, Soviet-produced equipment, tanks, artillery, but even Soviet jets. And now Slovakia just doesn't have any arms to send to Ukraine. But the pro-Russian swap in Slovakia has two very negative aspects. First, it's a moral win for Vladimir Putin, and he will, of course, use this change in Slovakian rhetorics to try to ignite this pseudo-discussion in the West, saying, look, Slovakia has changed its mind, why doesn't Germany change it, or other countries? And second, with the pro-Russian government, if Fico will be prime minister in Slovakia, the pro-Russian government will mean that NATO structures of Slovakia and intelligence agencies of Slovakia could be under influence of pro-Russian politicians. So Slovakia can become into a like black hole for European intelligence agencies, like leaking information in the worst case to Russia. But what I want to add to what I said before, the whole discussion in the US that Ukraine support costs US too much money, it's just not true, because most of the money the United States invests in the support of Ukraine, this money remains in the US. The US orders new equipment, which comes into the US Army, and the US Army sends to Ukraine older equipment from the warehouses. It is not up-to-date equipment. It's equipment produced 20 and 30 years ago, pretty old equipment, without like new electronics, without new secret devices. The US is actually doing rearming of its own army and pays salary to its workers, pays money to its own arm producers, and doesn't send like money to Ukraine. The US sends weapons to Ukraine, which are being transferred from the old American warehouses, which the US doesn't need anymore. That is what the discussion really misses.
All right, I've been talking to Sergei Sumleni. He's a defense expert and director at European Resilience Initiative Center. Sergei, thank you.
Thank you so much.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.